I'm going to show you how to do some paper piecing. So I've got some fabric. This is English paper piecing. So we're going to use these, make some little hexagons, and then we're going to do Sashiko as well. So all of this is going to make a block. To do this, you just want to cut out one of these in your fabric. So either you can just draw around it, or you can just cut, you know, about 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch around the outside. I draw my outline first against the rows, and then I cut a little, about 1/2 an inch from that line. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw around these, and then I'll show you the next step. I've started to get some ready. I already had the pre-cut hexagons because I had bought some. And so what I did was I cut the shape around it, and I just pressed these edges all in, all the way around. And I did give them a good press so that they would make a nice crisp edge for me to sew later. And now I'm just going to tack these pieces together, these corners, and that'll help to hold it in place. And I'm not taking the papers out yet, but I will take them out later on when I've sewn them. They just help me to keep the edges nicely in place. And all I'm doing is putting a couple of stitches at each corner point. Nothing down the middle of the row, because you wouldn't really be able to sew through the cardboard anyway. So, and if you did, you wouldn't be able to take it out afterwards, so that wouldn't work very well. So I've done quite a few of the hexagon type paper piecing. There is another method that some people use where they actually put some glue down here and glue it to the paper until they've sewn it. I've done it that way too, and that works fine. This is a very small amount though. I'm just doing, I think it's 5 hexagons I've cut here. So I'm not going to do that. I think this will stay in place. I'm actually currently working on a big hexagon quilt that I've been doing for a while. It's bigger hexagons than this, and it's all in dark blues. And then I'm going to do some Sashiko on it when it's finished. And it's another of those projects that I do and go back to, and seem to have quite a lot of ongoing long projects. I just like that kind of thing. So maybe one day I'll show you that in a video. But I just want to get this sewn down, and then I'll show you how this is going to lay and start doing some of the actual stitching that will hold the hexagons together. Okay, this is the last corner, so I'm going to do an extra stitch or so here. Make sure that it doesn't all fall out before I get it sewn together. And I will put some Sashiko on this square as well. Haven't actually decided what. Okay, so when I put these on here, it's just going to come down from the top. So that's going to be my central one that'll lay up there like that. And then I'm going to have 4 around there, alternating colours. Like I need to turn it a little bit. So I'll be sewing it together something like that, and then part of it will actually disappear into the seam. So let's just go ahead and start off by sewing this one to this one along this row. So to do that, you just fold right sides together. You can see that this paper allows you to really match up that seam that you're going to sew. And then you want to take a fairly matching thread to sew this seam. So I have this kind of blue colour that should tone in with most of it. So I'm going to push my needle up into the corner there. I have a knot in my thread. I'll always go directly across from one point to the other. there. Now I actually did a couple of extra stitches there just to make sure it didn't come out. Put your needle back in directly opposite where your thread came out. And as I say, I do really do quite small stitches on this. And you're just taking a couple of threads. You're not going very deep into your fabric. And the cardboard being under there as well actually helps that it stops you pushing your needle down and taking too big a bite. So I'm back to the corner, and in each corner that I do, I always do 2 stitches rather than 1. And that's just to make sure it doesn't come apart in the corner. So I've done along that seam there. If I open it out now, you can see that's joined. And the next thing I'll do is join that one there. So I'll fold that in and I'll repeat that going down there. I've stitched my 5 hexagons together, and now I'm removing the papers from them. So the way that I'm doing that is I'm clipping all the little basting stitches that I've put in around them and pulling those threads out. When I've done that, these papers will just slide out really easily. And because I press these quite well, they'll stay in shape long enough for me to put a tacking stitch along them to just hold them in place for the next step. Doesn't matter if these are big and ugly, they're coming out. Once I've got everything sewn down, this is just a temporary measure. So I need to get my square that this is going to go onto and just decide how I want this to fit. Do I just want it to come straight down, or do I want it to be at a bit of an angle? I think I'm just going to have it come straight down. And do I want to cut the top off, or do I want to... You just have to decide what you want to do with it, really. I think I'm just going to do it like that, but I just want to pin that in place. And then just doing Sashiko around this will actually hold it in place, especially if I do it right on the edge, which holds the folds in. But I think I'm actually just going to applique this down. Yeah, I think that'll be the best option. So just cut off my thread there. And later on this edge along the top, I'll just trim that off. So I'm just going to applique this on, starting with a knot. And each time I'm coming out into the fold of my hexagon and going back in at exactly the same point on the underneath. When I come to each corner, I'm going to make sure that I have a stitch that comes exactly out of the point of each corner. And so I know it's hand sewn, but it really won't take very long to go around this edge. It's not a big job, it's not very far. So, and I just think it'll be worth that extra step just to make sure that nothing comes loose underneath. And then after I've done this, I will also be putting some Sashiko on this square. Probably some on the hexagons, and otherwise I'll decide later where else to put some Sashiko and what pattern I'm going to do. So I'm going to continue working around this. And then when I've gone all the way around, I'll just pull all these little basting tacking threads out. I do also have another card here in the middle that I need to pull out, but I'll do that as well. And then I'll come back and show you some Sashiko. This is the hexagons sewn onto the backing square. I've done my little stitch all the way around and appliqued them to the back here. I do just have some pins in this top edge because I'm not doing anything up there. Later on, the little points will be trimmed off, and where it's joined to the next square block, I'll keep everything there in place. So I'm just leaving the pins in there for the moment. If you find having pins there is a nuisance, you can just tack. I would just take, 5 seconds to just run a tacking stitch or a basting stitch along there. In the meantime now, I am going to take out these little tacking stitches that I had holding my hexagons together. And then I'm going to do some Sashiko around the edges. At the moment on this, I'm just going to do Sashiko line along the edge on the inside here, and probably one along the edge on the outside. I think on this pale blue, it's not going to show up that well. And I'm going to start not quite at the edge because I don't want my knot that I'm beginning with to get cut off when I trim anything together. But the first stitch will be inside, well, it'll be actually at the edge of the seam, so that'll be okay. And this Sashiko serves a double purpose actually, because not only does it just decorate, but it is also another layer of holding these hexagons into place. Even though I've done the applique and they won't come out anyway, but still, it is an extra security layer that they won't come out. But I am going over an extra layer of cloth here because it's a fold. And I'm doing that with this without drawing any lines. If the lines don't look straight enough and I'm not happy with them, I may just get a ruler and mark my lines around these edges. But usually just the straight line edge of what you're working on is enough to for you to be able to follow and use that as a guide. Trying to keep it a fairly uniform distance from the edge. A little bit harder to pull through just because of the extra layer there. So the original piece that inspired me to do this, in this particular area, has just some straight line Sashiko rather than a pattern. And once I've put these hexagons on, I'm trying to decide whether to follow that idea or actually do another pattern beneath. But I kind of like that random straight line showing up every so often, so I think that might be what I do. So I'm going to do this part and then I'll decide. I may need to get my little rubber helper out to pull this thread through here, because I want to try and do that little inch, whatever it is, inch and a half, in one go, because it just helps me to keep my line straighter and more even. Yeah, I think I'm going to tack as well and take those pins out because my thread is just tangling around them a little bit. Okay, well I hope, you know, that is very pale, so I hope that shows up where you can see it. So I'm going to, as I say, go around the whole edge, and when I've done that I'll show you. And the Sashiko line that I'm talking about, it would just be a straight line, a couple of rows across there like that. I may even do it and see what it looks like and decide and maybe change my mind later. Sometimes you have to actually physically do it before you can decide whether that's really what you want. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that, and I'll be back. I've done the Sashiko all around the hexagons, just on the inside and just on the outside. And I've done this couple of rows of Sashiko. This is after the style of the piece of fabric that inspired me. It's really different to the other squares, so when it's put together I'll just have to see what it looks like. The thing about Sashiko is if you don't like it, you can actually take it out. At the moment, I mean, I like the original style, so I'm going with it. And then up here at this center point, I decided to put these extra little Sashiko parts in just on this center piece. And so to do this, I just drew a grid 3/8 of an inch apart lines in both directions. And I'm just in straight rows doing these little, forming these little crosses here. I'm just going down this last row, and this part will be done. And then I'm not going to do anything else on this particular square at the moment. So whether I decide to come back later and do something else on it, I'm not sure. But for now, it fits in with my plan of what I'm doing. And any changes I'll make later if I end up just not liking the look of it. Pull this through. And I'm just going to finish that off on the back. Now on the back here, when you do English paper piecing, you have this extra layer. And if you wanted to, before you did the Sashiko, you could actually cut out this whole section so you'd only have a single layer. But for me, that's not important. I think that the extra layer under there is not going to cause me a problem, and I'm not worried about it. But you do have that option. Yeah, some people say do that, and some people say don't if you don't want to. Really, it's just a waste of fabric. If you're making a quilt that's for warmth, you know, why would you take an extra layer out of fabric that's going to keep you warm? And then I'm just going to cut these points off here. I'm actually going to just do it with a pair of scissors. I have the line of the square to guide me. I do particularly like this English paper piece, and it's just a real pleasurable thing to do because I like to hand sew, so maybe if you don't like to hand sew, you don't get as much enjoyment out of it. So when that's sewn together, of course, a little bit more, another 1/4 of an inch will vanish off the top of there, but that's the finished square, and that can go up on my design wall now. It'll actually go this way up. That'll go up on my design wall now with the other squares.